Fire everything we've got now! Captain Jarek Salvo's voice thundered through the bridge, his command cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. His hands gripped the command console, knuckles white, eyes sharp as razors. The alien fleet had made its move. The calm before the storm was over. The viewport trembled as the first salvo of Earth's orbital weapons erupted into the void, streaking towards the approaching invaders. For a moment, the space outside the ship lit up, a flash of violent light cutting through the dark expanse. "Target locked," Lieutenant Grace Holt called out, her fingers flying over the console. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. First volley launched, direct hit on the lead ship. Jarek didn't flinch. He watched the enemy fleet on the screen, a sprawling constellation of metal, gleaming with the arrogance of invaders. Their lead vessel, still towering above Earth's defenses, absorbed the strike but barely slowed down. The shock waves rippled across the alien ships, but they didn't falter. They didn't even seem to notice the sting. "Captain, they're retaliating faster than we expected." Grace's voice wavered with strain. Her eyes locked on the tactical display, sweat dripping from her brow. "Their shields are stronger than any of our projections." "Damn it," Jarek muttered under his breath, his jaw tightening. He punched the console, but his anger wasn't for show. He knew they'd been outgunned, but this was different. The invaders were too calm, too sure of themselves. He could feel their confidence radiating across the void. It gnawed at him. "Report from command," Isabel Kane called out, her voice cool and collected despite the growing chaos. "They've confirmed our worst fears. The fleet's coming in fast. 10,000 ships, Captain. This isn't a raid. It's a full-scale invasion." Jarek stood motionless for a heartbeat. 10,000 ships. The weight of that number settled in his chest like a stone. He could hear the low hum of the air filtration system in the background, the only reminder of the world inside this ship, this floating command center that felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. "They're coming for Earth," he said, the words heavy with finality. "We knew this day would come, but we didn't know it would come this quickly." Grace's eyes met his, filled with a mix of fear and determination. She wasn't one for dramatics, but even she couldn't hide the fear in her gaze. Earth wasn't ready for this. None of them were. "We can't hold them off forever," she said, her voice trembling. "What's the plan, Captain?" Jarek's eyes flickered to the tactical display, his fingers running along the edges of the console, as if searching for something that would turn the tide. The map of Earth, its continents, the blue oceans, the scattered remnants of its defenses, loomed before him like a fragile glass window. The invaders were already testing that window, pushing at the glass with their overwhelming force. "Phase 1, Jarek said, his voice low but sharp. "Launch all drones. We're not waiting for them to hit us first." His command was met with a flurry of activity as the crew scrambled to execute the orders. Outside the viewport, Earth's defenses came alive, launching dozens of combat drones into the darkness. The sleek metallic bodies of the drones streaked past the window, headed straight for the alien invaders. Their weapons powered up, glowing with dangerous intensity. For a brief moment, Jarek almost allowed himself to believe it could work. Maybe Earth's edge of surprise would be enough. But then, the invaders fired. The blasts were fast, ruthless. One of Earth's drones shattered into 1,000 pieces as a beam of searing light sliced through it. Another exploded in a brilliant flash, leaving nothing but debris in its wake. Jarek's stomach tightened. "They're too advanced," he muttered. "We need to think bigger, think faster." His mind raced. Earth wasn't some helpless world waiting to be conquered. It couldn't be. He had to make sure of that. The aliens might have superior technology, but they had underestimated Earth's one true advantage, its unpredictability. "Activate Phase 2, Jarek barked. "We're deploying the last of our heavy artillery. I don't care how many ships they have, they won't take us without a fight." He stood firm, not allowing himself a second of doubt. The energy of the room pulsed around him. Every officer focused, their faces lit by the glow of their screens. The weight of their collective responsibility rested on Jarek's shoulders, and he didn't mind it. If Earth was going to survive this, It would survive because of the decisions he made here, in this room, today. The enemy was still advancing, but Jarek's mind was already 5 steps ahead. He could feel the shift, the battle unfolding before him like a game of chess. Every move, every counterattack had to be perfect. "We've got one shot at this," Jarek said, his voice like gravel. "I need you all to hold it together. This isn't just about winning. It's about making them regret ever thinking they could take Earth." Grace nodded, her eyes narrowing in determination. "Phase 2, ready, Captain?" "Launch it," he ordered. The sound of his command hung in the air for a split second before the ship's weapons activated. The viewport flashed with the intensity of Earth's final assault. The alien ships dispersed once again, but Jarek didn't let his eyes leave the screen. This was just the beginning. The shockwave of Earth's retaliatory assault rippled through the bridge, a momentary victory too fleeting to bring comfort. Outside the viewport, the alien fleet adjusted, evasive maneuvers that suggested the invaders hadn't underestimated Earth's resolve. They were just getting started. But neither was Captain Jarek Salvo. He stood motionless, his eyes burning with the sharp intensity of a commander who had fought too many battles to flinch now. "Report!" Jarek growled, his voice tight but not shaken. The enemy wasn't done yet. Neither was he. "Minimal damage to their flagship, Captain," Grace Holt responded, her voice steady, yet tinged with the same raw edge of frustration that gnawed at the crew. "They are repositioning, adjusting their shields. We hit them, but not hard enough." Jarek nodded, eyes still locked on the tactical display. It was too soon to celebrate. Earth's defenses had barely made a dent in their might. 10,000 ships, many of them equipped with technology that Earth's best minds had yet to understand, were converging like a storm on an unprepared world, a world he was sworn to protect. "Activate the secondary defense grid," Jarek ordered, his voice cutting through the haze of disquiet in the room. "Send them a message they'll feel." The crew moved swiftly, working in sync like a well-oiled machine. The cold steel of the ship seemed to close in on Jarek, the low thrum of the ship's systems vibrating through his feet, the air heavier now with the weight of what was to come. The dim lights overhead flickered for a moment, casting long shadows across the room. In the corner, Isabel Kane, ever the steady hand, monitored incoming transmissions with an air of relentless focus. Her face was a mask of resolve, eyes locked on the screens as if nothing could distract her. Jarek felt the tension coil in his chest. He knew what had to come next, but that didn't make the decision easier. Earth's commanders, their supposed leaders, still hadn't made the call. There were talks of retreat, of last-minute diplomacy, but Jarek had no faith in any of it. Time was a luxury they no longer had. "Sir," came a voice from behind. It was Lieutenant Patrick Cross, his usually calm demeanor now tinged with barely concealed urgency. "We've received a transmission from the UN Council. They're pushing for negotiations, but they're asking for more time." "More time?" Jarek snapped, turning to face him. "More time to do what? To die in peace?" His voice was low, but the anger behind it was palpable, cutting the tension in the room with a sudden sharpness. Patrick didn't flinch, but Jarek could see the strain in his eyes. He wasn't the only one who felt the weight of the moment. "I'm just relaying the message, Captain, but nothing," Jarek interrupted. "We've been wasting time since the first signal came in. No more delays. We fight. Now." There was no hesitation this time. The words were out, and Jarek felt them settle into the air like a weight that had finally found its rightful place. Grace nodded without a word, and the rest of the crew fell into position, their movements deliberate as they continued to prepare for what was coming. Jarek's thoughts drifted for a moment, back to his early days in the military. He had once believed in diplomacy, in talks and agreements, but after the endless battles, the betrayals, and the pain, he had learned the truth. Talks were nothing but a distraction from the inevitable. And Earth didn't have the luxury of distractions, not this time. As he watched his officers work, a sudden thought flickered through his mind, a realization he had been pushing away since the first transmission. The aliens weren't here to conquer Earth. Not in the way they thought. They were testing something, pushing at Earth's defenses, testing the planet's resolve. He gripped the edge of his console, his pulse quickening. "Are the reserves in position?" Yes, sir, Grace replied, eyes never leaving the screens, hands moving faster than Jarek could track. All units prepped and ready. But despite her words, Jarek knew it wouldn't be enough. The enemy had shown their power too quickly, their resilience too strong. He had to outthink them. He had to play a different game. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Isabel's voice cut through the silence that followed. Captain, we've decrypted a portion of the alien transmission. It's a directive from their command fleet. They're asking for surrender. She paused for a second, letting the weight of the words settle. They're testing us. Jarek's eyes narrowed. Testing Earth. For what? Was this just another part of the game, or was there something else, something more dangerous lurking beneath the surface? They expect us to cower, Jarek muttered, his teeth gritted. But they're wrong. We will not break. Not this time. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Grace's fingers tapped rapidly across her console, initiating the countermeasures for the next wave. We're locking onto their formation, Captain. We can disrupt their attack with an electromagnetic pulse. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down. Do it. Jarek's voice was as sharp as a blade. The ship shook suddenly, lightly at first, then with a growing intensity as the pulse of energy surged outward from Earth's defenses. A brilliant flash illuminated the space outside the viewport, briefly blinding the crew. In the immediate aftermath, the tension in the room spiked. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. Isabel spoke, her voice quieter now, as though she had come to a troubling conclusion. The alien fleet's response time is improving. They're adapting faster than we can. Jarek's fists clenched, and he fought to keep the anger in check. He wasn't going to let Earth fall, not now, not after everything they had fought for. The room around him felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing in on his chest. He could hear the faint clatter of equipment, the sharp clicks of weapon systems locking into place, but it all felt distant, muffled by the growing sense of inevitability. Captain, Patrick's voice cut through the silence, we're detecting something unusual from the alien fleet. Jarek turned to face him, his eyes steely. What is it? They're adjusting their formation, Patrick replied, like they're trying to anticipate our next move. Jarek's eyes flickered to the tactical display, his mind racing. The aliens were planning something big. But what? He couldn't shake the feeling that Earth's true role in this war had not yet been revealed. They were more than a target. They were something far more dangerous, something that the aliens weren't prepared for. We're not just defending Earth, Jarek muttered under his breath, staring at the ever-growing mass of alien ships. We're playing their game, and we're going to win. Jarek stood rigid, his gaze fixed on the tactical display as the alien fleet descended upon Earth with the crushing inevitability of a storm. The first wave of their firepower had left Earth's defenses trembling, but the enemy wasn't finished. His pulse quickened. They were learning, adapting with frightening precision. But so were the humans. The control room was buzzing with activity. The flickering lights above cast long shadows across the crew, their faces illuminated by the glowing consoles before them. The air was dense, thick with the weight of the battle unfolding outside the ship's walls. Jarek could almost taste the tension, sharp and metallic in the back of his throat. Prepare for their assault. Jarek's voice was calm, deliberate, but it held the gravity of a man who understood the stakes. His fingers flexed as though he could feel the pulse of the enemy's advance in his bones. Don't give them a moment to breathe. From the corner of his vision, he could see Grace Holt at her station, her face tight with concentration. Her fingers hovered above the controls, ready to deploy the next phase of Earth's offensive. The rest of the crew was already moving into action, their quiet efficiency a contrast to the storm brewing outside. They're coming in fast, Captain, Grace reported, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the screen. Fleet's been split into 3 main groups. They've launched a wave of drones. The information settled like a weight on Jarek's shoulders. Drones, more numbers. The enemy had no shortage of them, and Earth was barely scratching the surface with its defenses. But Jarek had something they didn't, strategic cunning, and he would use it. Deploy countermeasures, he ordered. his eyes flickering to the central screen. "And activate the cloaking protocols. We'll make them think they've won the first round." "Deploying now," Grace acknowledged, her fingers dancing across the control board. Outside, the calm of space shattered as Earth's weapons erupted, targeting the incoming drones with precision. The barrage of energy shot out like a barrage of lightning, illuminating the dark void. The alien drones scattered, trying to avoid the hits, but the humans were relentless. The beams connected, 1, 2, 3 hits, and the drones exploded in flashes of white-hot fire, their systems rendered useless. Earth was holding strong for now. Jarek could feel the shift. The aliens were getting smarter. They weren't just relying on brute force, they were adapting. That thought gnawed at him. Their movements were too deliberate. The urgency was palpable. "Captain!" Lieutenant Cross's voice broke through the moment, a thread of unease in his tone. "I'm picking up something unusual. A new signal. It's encrypted. It's coming from the lead ship." The words didn't settle well in Jarek's gut. "Is it a transmission?" he asked, his tone sharper now. "Possibly, but it's nothing like what we've seen before." "Decrypt it," Jarek barked. His gaze shifted back to the viewport. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle coming together, but just out of reach. He had known from the start that Earth's defenses were only part of the equation. They were up against something more calculated, something designed to crack humanity's resolve. As the decryptions began, the minutes dragged on like hours. The room felt stifling, the air thick with anticipation. The low buzz of equipment was the only sound that filled the space, though it was drowned out by the pounding of Jarek's heart in his chest. The enemy fleet was still advancing, growing larger on the display. Their presence was like a shadow stretching out across the planet, a reminder of the ticking clock. Finally, the encryption broke. "Captain, we've got something," Cross's voice snapped through the silence. "It's not a direct transmission, but a warning. It mentions Project Thunderbolt and Earth's involvement." Jarek's breath caught in his throat, his mind racing. Project Thunderbolt? It was something he had never heard of, but the words felt like a clue, like a piece of the puzzle that had been deliberately kept hidden from him. He locked eyes with Grace, who was already searching through the incoming data, her face pale but determined. "Thunderbolt?" Jarek repeated, his voice low, the weight of the unknown settling in his bones. "What is it?" "Could be another of their tactics," Grace speculated, her fingers flying over the console. "Or something we don't know about." Jarek's gaze never left the screen. The alien fleet was only a few moments away from full engagement, but this new development could shift everything. Earth had always been underestimated, but the aliens hadn't factored in the possibility of something hidden beneath their radar. Earth's history was rich with secrets. Could this be one of them? Before he could ask another question, the tactical screen flashed with warnings. "Captain," Isabel Kane's voice rang out, calm but urgent. "The enemy is increasing their bombardment. They've begun their final approach." Jarek turned his attention back to the fight. "Deploy all remaining interceptors," he ordered, his voice firm, "and initiate evasive maneuvers. We need to keep them guessing." Outside the ship, the enemy's weapons flashed to life. Energy beams cut through the darkness like laser-guided knives, bright and fast. Earth's defenses struggled to keep up, but Jarek's tactical brilliance had given them a fighting chance. Each intercepted shot, each evasive maneuver, bought them precious moments. But it wasn't enough. The alien forces were relentless in their assault. Earth's last line of defense was shuddering, held together by sheer willpower and determination. Then the unthinkable happened. A sudden distortion rippled across the ship. The air pressure shifted, causing a faint metallic taste to bloom in the back of Jarek's mouth. The hum of the energy systems fluctuated, turning the silence into a living thing, crackling with power. Something had happened, something he couldn't yet explain. "Report!" Jarek barked, his heart pounding in his chest. The screen in front of him flickered, then settled. The energy signature was shifting again. The lead alien ship had pulled away slowly, almost as if it were regrouping. "It's a trap," Jarek muttered under his breath. They're pulling back to reevaluate. This isn't over. Grace's face turned pale as she stared at the screen. Captain, we're getting strange readings from the alien ship. They've opened a... Before she could finish, a flash of light burst from the alien ship's core. The shockwave shook the ship, rattling the crew in their seats. The transmission cut out. The mystery of Earth's involvement in their plans was still unsolved, but now Jarek knew something much worse was coming. The warning had been sent. Project Thunderbolt wasn't just a tactic, it was a signal. The aliens were preparing for something bigger, and Earth was just the beginning. The shockwave from the alien flagship still rippled through the control room, a tremor of unease that clung to the air like smoke after a fire. The crew, usually stoic under pressure, now felt the weight of the situation bearing down on them. Jarek's eyes never left the viewport, his mind calculating their next move, even as the alien forces closed in with relentless precision. He could almost taste the sharp tang of metal in the air, the sensation of his own blood pulsing at his temples. "They're pulling back." Grace Holt's voice broke through the tense silence, but it wasn't reassuring. Her words were laced with suspicion. "They're repositioning, regrouping." Jarek didn't flinch. He knew better than to trust a moment of respite. The aliens had already proven they were far from predictable, and this sudden retreat only fueled his growing sense of unease. His fingers tapped the edge of the console, his mind racing. "Patch me through to command," he snapped, his voice tight. His orders were met with immediate compliance, the network humming to life around him, but Jarek could feel the growing dissonance in the room. The whole crew was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable next strike. The holographic display flickered as the connection was made, the face of General Thomas West appearing on the screen. The lines on his face were drawn tight, his voice grim. "Captain, we're receiving intelligence from the front. Their fleet is shifting formation. They're preparing something we're not ready for." Jarek's heart sank as he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What are they preparing? More weapons?" General West didn't reply immediately. When he spoke, his voice was heavier than before, tinged with a subtle fear. "Not weapons, Captain. Something different. I think it's their command ship. It's moving into position, and we're getting reports of strange energy readings from the core." Jarek clenched his jaw. "They're not just attacking us. They're testing us." The realization hit him with the force of a punch. The invaders weren't merely here to conquer. They were evaluating Earth. They were pushing the limits, searching for weaknesses. And now, they were about to reveal their true power. "Prepare our weapons for a counterstrike," Jarek ordered, his voice cold. "And I want every available unit ready for evasive maneuvers." "Captain," Grace said, her voice catching his attention. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical display. "There's something else. I'm not sure how to explain it, but the alien ship is emitting a pulse. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. It's disrupting our sensors." Jarek's stomach tightened. The idea of a pulse was a new kind of threat, something that could cripple Earth's advanced technology before they even had a chance to respond. "Can we stop it?" Jarek asked, though he already knew the answer. He could see it in her face. "I don't think so, Captain. It's unlike anything we've encountered." The air in the room seemed to thicken with the weight of the unknown. Every second stretched on, dragging the crew deeper into a web of uncertainty. Jarek felt the pressure pressing against his chest as he stood before the map of Earth, watching the alien fleet move with the kind of fluid precision that only an enemy so confident could afford. "They're waiting for us," Jarek muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "They're waiting for us to make a move, and make a move they would." Earth had no choice but to fight, even if the odds seemed insurmountable. The alien forces had underestimated them once, but Jarek knew they wouldn't make that mistake again. Earth's survival depended on staying one step ahead, and if that meant taking risks, then Jarek was prepared to gamble everything. Suddenly, a sharp, high-pitched alarm tore through the air, breaking the tension in the room. The lights flickered as the sensors flashed red across the screen, a warning that made Jarek's heart pound louder than the alarm itself. "Captain!" Isabel Kane's voice rang out, her calm demeanor at odds with the chaos unfolding on the screen. "The alien fleet is..." They're adapting again. Their weapons are recalibrating. Jarek's thoughts skittered across the possibilities. The enemy was already responding to Earth's tactics, and the pulse they were emitting was likely just the beginning. He could see it now, the beginning of a war of attrition. The aliens had no interest in simply overwhelming Earth with sheer numbers. They wanted to break them mentally, wear them down until there was nothing left. "We need to disrupt their control," Jarek said, his voice sharp, cutting through the panic. "I want all non-essential systems diverted to the anti-electromagnetic shields. We'll take the fight to them." For a brief moment, the room was silent as the crew moved into action. The quiet rush of footsteps and clacking of keys was the only sound in the room. The sharp scent of burning circuits tingled in the air as the ship's systems began redirecting power to the newly activated shields. Outside the viewport, the alien fleet's movements became more erratic, the pulse of energy surrounding them almost visible, like a ghostly haze. Jarek's eyes never left the screen. He could feel the tension in the pit of his stomach, the way the ship seemed to hum with the expectation of something monumental about to unfold. And then the sky exploded. A violent burst of light filled the dark expanse of space, and for a split second, Jarek thought the ship might crumble under the force. The energy burst from the alien flagship, cascading outward in a blinding display. The air inside the control room grew thick with the scent of burning metal and ozone as the blast rattled the hull. The room groaned under the pressure, and Jarek's breath caught in his throat. "Report!" he shouted, but the words felt empty as they left his mouth. "We've lost contact with the forward sensor arrays," Grace said, her voice laced with disbelief. "Whatever they just deployed, it's cutting through our systems like a hot knife through butter. We're blind." Jarek's heart skipped a beat. The mystery deepened. What had the aliens just unleashed? The glow from the alien flagship still lingered in the darkness, a harbinger of something darker yet to come. The pulsating energy field distorted the space around it, warping reality itself in ways that defied all of Jarek's training. The aliens were pushing the boundaries of science, reaching into the realm of the impossible. "I won't let them break us," Jarek muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We've faced worse before. We will fight." But deep inside, he knew the truth. This wasn't just another battle. This was something far beyond Earth's ability to comprehend. And whatever was coming next, Jarek knew one thing for certain. It would change everything. Jarek's heart hammered in his chest, the pulsating rhythm of battle and anticipation vibrating through his very bones. The view outside the viewport had become a swirling chaos of light and shadow, a storm of energy blasts and flickering shields. The alien fleet had opened fire once again, but Earth's defenses were holding, barely. The hum of the ship's systems felt almost suffocating, each passing moment bringing them closer to an uncertain fate. "Captain, the energy readings from the alien flagship are off the scale," Grace said, her voice sharp with alarm. Her fingers danced over the console, tracking the erratic pulses of energy. "This is unlike anything we've encountered before. They're charging something. I don't know what." Jarek didn't need to look at the screen to feel the shift. There was a growing weight in the air, as though the very fabric of space itself had thickened around them. He could hear the faint crackling of static through his earpiece, and in his chest, the pressure of the unknown tightened with each passing second. The alien fleet wasn't just attacking anymore. They were probing, testing, and the longer they went unanswered, the more dangerous it became. He turned sharply to Isabel. "How much time do we have before they launch whatever they're preparing?" She didn't hesitate. "Minutes, at most." Jarek could feel the tension in the room tighten, like the moment before a storm breaks. His mind raced, calculating his next move, knowing that every second was another step closer to catastrophe. But the alien fleet wasn't going to give him the luxury of time. "We need to deploy everything," Jarek snapped, his voice a tight whip. "Activate the quantum shields. Scramble all frequencies. I want every fleet asset locked onto that flagship." Outside, the battlefield raged on, but Jarek's focus was unshakable. Earth's last hope was to disrupt the alien flagship's progress before it could unleash whatever weapon they were charging. If they failed now, there would be no coming back. The control room hummed with frantic energy as orders flew back and forth. He could feel the tension in the crew, their movements quick and calculated, but always strained. Grace moved between stations with a precision that reflected the urgency of the moment, her face drawn tight with the pressure of the decisions they were making. The room was growing hotter. The metallic tang of recycled air mingled with the faint burn of overheating equipment, a reminder of just how fragile their situation was. Jarek's mind didn't falter, but the creeping sense of doubt began to gnaw at the edges of his resolve. Were they prepared for what was coming? "Captain," Isabel called, her voice sharp. "The flagship is launching something. I can't get a clear read on it yet, but it's massive. The energy signature is unlike anything we've seen." "Lock onto it," Jarek ordered. "Whatever it is, we intercept it now. We don't wait for the full assault." For a moment, the room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional clatter of fingers on keys. The crew worked without words, absorbed in the frantic precision of their roles. But Jarek couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens were calculating every move, studying Earth's responses like an insect trapped in a web. Then it happened. The space outside exploded in a burst of radiant light, brilliant, overwhelming, a distortion of the laws of physics themselves. Earth's shields screamed in protest as the unknown energy pierced through them, cutting into the very fabric of their defenses. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. The alien fleet had found a way to break them, to break Earth itself. Jarek's stomach lurched. He could see the shockwave, the rippling energy, the reality itself bending under the weight of the alien force. The ship shuddered violently, metal groaning as the strain pulled at its very seams. There was no time to react, no time to second-guess. They were in the grip of something far worse than any weapon Earth had ever seen. "Report!" Jarek barked, his voice rising over the chaos. The bridge seemed to close in on him, the air growing thick, suffocating. "We're losing power across multiple systems," Grace shouted, her voice shaking but determined. "Shields are down to 30%, Captain. We can't hold this much longer." Jarek's eyes flicked across the control room. The crew was struggling, but they weren't broken yet. Earth wasn't defeated, not as long as he still had breath in his body. The ship rattled again, but he forced himself to focus. They needed to buy time, enough time to finish what they started. "Activate the secondary weapons array," Jarek commanded, his voice unyielding. "Target the flagship's core. If we can't stop their energy pulse, we stop them another way." For a brief moment, nothing happened, and then the ship jolted, a deep vibration that ran through Jarek's bones, a gut-wrenching reminder of the enemy's power. The bridge was alive with movement, officers scrambling to keep pace with the sudden chaos unfolding around them. Yet beneath all the activity, Jarek remained still, the center of a storm he had no intention of letting destroy them. "Systems coming online," Isabel's voice was taut with effort. "Weapons locked. Captain, we're ready." "Fire," Jarek commanded, his voice steady, despite the churning anxiety in his chest. The weapons roared to life, beams of concentrated energy ripping through the vastness of space. Jarek could feel the ship surge beneath him as the first volley tore through the air, but even as the energy streams connected, he knew it wouldn't be enough. The alien flagship had absorbed far worse, and this attack, while devastating, was only a ripple in the storm that was coming. The flagship's energy surged again, brighter than before. The alien ships, now united in purpose, began their final approach. The tactical display blinked red, indicating an incoming wave. This wasn't just an attack. This was a statement. Jarek's mind raced. "Are the cloaking systems ready?" "We've engaged the cloaks, Captain," Grace responded, her hands a blur of movement. "But they've locked on to our signatures. They know we're here." A chilling silence filled the bridge. The crew's faces were lit by the cold glow of the consoles, their expressions painted with the fear that had begun to seep into their bones. The sheer size of the alien fleet, combined with the destructive potential of their flagship's energy weapon, made their chances seem slimmer with each passing second. Jarek stood, his eyes focused, his jaw clenched tight, as the situation unfolded before him like a nightmare in real time. There was no more room for hesitation. There was no more time to plan. They were in the fight of their lives, and whatever came next, Jarek would make sure that Earth didn't go down without a final stand. "Get ready for everything," he said, his voice resolute, cutting through the tension. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. We fight to the last." The air in the room thickened, and Jarek's breath caught in his throat as he stared out into the darkness of space, knowing that Earth's fate rested on the next few moments. But something deeper, something unspoken, lingered in the back of his mind. The enemy was here for more than just Earth. They were testing something, and Jarek had no idea what would happen when they revealed their true intentions. The room felt smaller, as if the walls had inched closer with the weight of what was to come. The air, thick and warm, clung to Jarek's skin, sweat beating at his temples as he stared at the tactical display. Outside the ship, the alien fleet had closed in, an unrelenting tide of steel and firepower. The brief respite, the small hope that Earth's defenses had given them a fighting chance, had dissipated. There was no time for second thoughts now, no time for doubt. "Shields are holding at 50%. Grace Holt's voice sliced through the tension, her hands steady despite the chaos that crackled in the air. "But we've got incoming from every direction. They're circling in." Jarek's eyes never wavered from the viewport, the pitch-black void filled with the slow approach of death. The alien ships moved like predators, relentless, fluid, precise. They weren't here to conquer Earth. They were here to crush it, to erase any trace of humanity's defiance. And Jarek was the one tasked with ensuring that didn't happen. "Deploy all remaining drones," Jarek barked, his voice hard, steady. "I want every fighter in the air. We make our stand here now." The ship trembled again, this time with greater force, a jarring shake that rattled the very bones of the vessel. The sensation spread through Jarek like a sickness, a gut-wrenching reminder of just how close they were to the abyss. He gripped the armrest of his chair, nails digging into the metal, eyes scanning the tactical map. "Captain, we're picking up a massive pulse from their flagship," Isabel Kane's voice cut through the noise. She stood across the room, her face pale but resolute. "Whatever they're preparing, it's nearly here. I can't pinpoint the exact nature of the energy yet, but it's escalating." Jarek's jaw tightened. The pulse, whatever it was, had been growing stronger with every passing second. The alien fleet was about to unleash something, a weapon more destructive than any he had seen before. The realization hit like a blow to the chest. The game had changed. Earth's defenses, while formidable, were never meant to withstand the full force of this onslaught. "We don't have time for this," Jarek muttered under his breath. He was already moving, pushing aside his doubts, refocusing. "Grace, Isabel, get the second wave of interceptors in position. We need to hit them before they fire." The pressure in the room was suffocating. Every action, every decision was amplified, each movement reverberating in the confined space. The air crackled with urgency, a growing static energy that swirled around the room. Jarek could almost feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him. Their survival depended on what they did in the next few moments. But despite his experience, despite the countless battles he had fought, this felt different. "Captain," Lieutenant Cross called out from the communications station. His face was shadowed by the flickering light from the screens, his voice tight. "They're broadcasting something. But it's not a standard transmission. It's almost like a signal." Jarek's heart skipped a beat. Another twist. "Put it through," he ordered, already bracing himself for the unknown. A distorted voice filled the room, deep and menacing, carrying an edge of something otherworldly. "This is the eternal hegemony. Earth is no longer a player in this galaxy. You will surrender now or you will be annihilated. Your efforts have been admirable, but futile." Jarek's fist clenched. The arrogance, the certainty in the alien voice was infuriating. But it was also a gift. The aliens were so confident in their superiority that they had underestimated Earth's ability to fight back. "We'll never surrender," Jarek muttered to himself, the words a promise. He turned back to the viewport. "Deploy everything, all weapons, all interceptors. We're not going down without a fight." Outside, Earth's defenses surged back to life. Fighters and drones scrambled into the dark sky, weaving in and out of formation with sharp, deadly precision. The energy cannons on the ship's hull flared to life, unleashing blasts that lit up the black void with deadly intent. Each shot aimed directly at the heart of the alien fleet. Jarek watched the explosions ripple across the tactical display, feeling a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But he knew it wouldn't last. "Shields are weakening, Captain," Grace shouted, her voice strained. "We can't take another direct hit like that." Jarek's stomach twisted. He had known it would come to this, the final stand. Earth had fought tooth and nail to stay alive, but the truth was undeniable now. Their survival was a long shot, and the odds were narrowing by the second. "Brace for impact!" Jarek yelled, his voice a roar against the cacophony of chaos. He knew the next few moments would determine their fate. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet, somehow, they were still here. Another tremor shook the ship, stronger this time. A new wave of alien energy blasts collided with the ship's defenses. This time, the shields gave way. The entire hull groaned, a deep metallic screech that sent a ripple of panic through the crew. "Captain!" Isabel shouted, her voice barely audible over the increasing noise. "We've lost contact with the drone forces. They're getting through." Jarek's pulse thundered in his ears. The aliens were breaching Earth's defenses, pushing past the final line of defense. Desperation flooded his chest, but he refused to give in. His crew, his planet, his people were depending on him. "Activate the quantum disruptors," he ordered. "Now!" The ship shuddered again, but this time there was a flicker of hope. The quantum disruptors activated, sending out a pulse that cascaded across the alien fleet. For a moment, the enemy hesitated. The energy shields that had been so impenetrable faltered, then flickered out. It was a small victory, but it was enough to shift the balance, even if only for a moment. "Captain," Grace said, her voice rising with a mix of urgency and disbelief. "The flagship is moving, but they're not retreating. They're charging up again. Whatever's coming, it's worse than before." Jarek's mind raced. There was no time left. The alien flagship was about to fire, and their weapon would likely destroy everything in its path. "We can't outrun it. We can't outfight it. But we can delay it." His voice was cold, focused. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Get us out of their targeting range." The ship lurched violently as the crew scrambled into action. The weapon systems fired again, the energy blasts rocketing out into space, but Jarek knew it was futile. The alien fleet was already preparing to retaliate. The final confrontation was inevitable. As the flagship loomed larger in the viewport, Jarek stared into the abyss. He could almost feel the pulse of the alien fleet, their energy surging like a tidal wave ready to crash over them. Earth's last line of defense was fading, and Jarek knew that this would be the moment that defined the future of his planet. In the silence that followed, only the distant hum of weapons charging filled the room, each second dragging like an eternity. The bridge was silent, save for the steady rush of movement as the crew worked feverishly to enact Jarek's orders. The hum of systems recalibrating filled the space, each click of a button and flicker of a screen amplifying the urgency that clung to the air. Jarek stood at the center of it all, his mind racing through the endless variables, each one a thread in the web of survival. The alien flagship loomed larger in their viewport, its energy systems charging once again. This time, Jarek knew they had no choice but to act decisively. "They're preparing to fire again, Captain!" Grace's voice cut through the tension, her eyes fixed on the screen. "The readings, they're even stronger this time." Jarek's pulse quickened. The alien fleet had already pushed them to the brink, and the weapon they were charging was like nothing Earth had ever seen. There wasn't much left to do except fight, and Jarek had never been one to shy away from a challenge. This was no longer a battle of brute force. It was a battle of minds, a test of humanity's ability to adapt, to outthink and outmaneuver a seemingly unstoppable force. "Deploy the final defensive systems," Jarek ordered, his voice sharp. "Activate the cloaking technology, but only for short bursts. We need to remain unpredictable." "Understood, Captain," Grace replied. Her fingers flew across her console, executing the orders with mechanical precision. The crew moved in synchrony, their faces taut with the pressure of the moment, but there was no panic, only the quiet, relentless focus of individuals who knew what was at stake. The ship shuddered again, a violent tremor that rattled the crew in their seats. The alien flagship had unleashed its first volley of energy, and the force of it sent a ripple through the hull. The bridge lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room, but Jarek didn't flinch. He had seen worse. He had been to the edge of battle more times than he cared to count, and he wasn't about to let this be the end. "Report!" Jarek barked, his voice unwavering despite the growing chaos. "Shields holding at 20%, Isabel said, her voice steady even as the strain showed in her face. "But the next wave will breach them. We don't have much time." Jarek's mind raced as he processed the information. The alien ship's energy weapon was strong, stronger than anything Earth's fleet had ever encountered, but it wasn't invulnerable. Nothing was. And the key to surviving this was understanding their opponent's weaknesses, not just the strength of their own defenses. "We need to create a gap in their formation," Jarek said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We need to confuse them, make them think we're retreating. It's the only way we can survive their next wave." Grace's gaze met Jarek's, understanding the implication immediately. "You want to make them think we're retreating, Captain? Draw them in?" "Yes, exactly that." Jarek's voice was steady, but his mind was already running ahead, calculating their next moves. "Once we've created the gap, we use the secondary drones to flank their core. They'll be expecting us to try and push through the outer lines. But we're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to outmaneuver them." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their significance. It was a gamble, a risky play that could easily backfire. But Jarek knew they had no other choice. They had to outthink the enemy, or they would perish. The seconds dragged on, each one filled with the mounting sense of inevitability. The alien ships were closing in, their energy systems charging, ready to obliterate anything in their path. Yet Jarek's mind was calm, focused. Every step of this plan had been carefully calculated. "We're ready, Captain," Grace said, her voice tight. "The cloaking device is ready to deploy. The drones are in position." Jarek's eyes flicked to the screen, watching as the alien fleet neared the edge of Earth's defense perimeter. He could see the flagship, its massive size dominating the battlefield, its weapons glowing like the eye of a storm. "Do it," Jarek commanded, his tone firm. The ship seemed to vanish into thin air, cloaking itself in a blanket of near invisibility, leaving behind nothing but the faintest trace of energy to confuse the alien sensors. Jarek could feel the tension in the crew's movements, their eyes fixed on their stations, their breaths held. The alien fleet hesitated. Their sensors swept the empty space, searching for the human ship, and for a brief moment, Earth was a ghost. The gap Jarek had hoped for was there, wide enough for them to slip through undetected. "Now!" Jarek shouted. The secondary drones, activated with pinpoint precision, erupted from their launch bays, streaking across the void toward the heart of the alien fleet. The drones weaved and darted, their movement unpredictable, designed to lure the enemy into a trap. They didn't attack, not yet. Their sole purpose was to create chaos, to confuse, to scatter the alien forces just long enough for Earth's final assault to land a killing blow. Jarek watched, his breath caught in his chest. The alien fleet was now split in half, reacting to the drones in ways Jarek hadn't anticipated. The flagship began to shift its focus, its massive weapons targeting the incoming drones instead of the cloaked ship. The larger fleet formations scattered, their concentration fractured, leaving an opening. For a moment, it felt as if the universe had given them a sliver of hope, a crack in the wall that had been built around them. Jarek's heart pounded in his chest as the plan unfolded exactly as he had hoped. The gap was there, wide and dangerous. Earth could push through it. "Charge the main cannon," Jarek said, his voice cool but resolute. "We take our shot now. We don't wait." The air in the control room thickened as the massive energy cannon, Earth's last hope, powered up. The ship shook again, but this time it wasn't a tremor of fear. It was the anticipation of what was to come. Every officer, every crew member felt the weight of that final shot, the one that could decide whether Earth survived or became another casualty in the galaxy's war. "Ready," Isabel said, her hands gripping the controls. The ship's weapon systems hummed with energy, the buildup almost palpable. "Fire," Jarek commanded. The beam of energy shot forward, its light slicing through the darkness of space like a comet. It hit the alien flagship head-on, the force of the blast rippling across the enemy's defenses. The flagship shuddered, its shields flickering. For a moment it seemed as if the ship might go down, but then just as quickly, the enemy's shields flared back to full strength. "Damn it!" Jarek cursed under his breath. "They're stronger than we thought. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. They're not giving up yet." But Jarek could see the doubt now. The aliens had tasted Earth's resistance, and they had felt the sting of a blow that had nearly cracked their mighty flagship. They had underestimated them, and though the fight was far from over, Jarek knew one thing for certain. They weren't done yet. The ship shuddered once more, but this time the tremor felt different. It wasn't the earth-shaking force of another alien blast. It was something far more subtle, something more dangerous. The calm before the storm. The alien flagship, still reeling from Earth's last strike, had regrouped, but this time, Jarek Salvo knew they were facing something more insidious. It wasn't just the firepower they had to fear. The aliens were learning. They were adapting. "Captain!" Grace Holt's voice, normally calm under pressure, now held an edge of disbelief. "The flagship, it's charging up again. But this time it's not just the weapon. They've shifted their entire fleet into a concentrated formation. They're preparing for a final strike." Jarek didn't need to hear more. He could see it in the way the enemy's ships moved, methodical, deliberate, like a hammer about to strike. The room was quiet, save for the soft clicks of consoles and the distant sound of rapid breathing. The crew had fought harder than anyone could have expected, but now they were running on fumes. The alien fleet was faster, more technologically advanced, and in terms of raw power, they had outmatched Earth at every turn. "We're not done yet," Jarek said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We'll hold them back. We'll make them regret ever stepping into our skies." The quiet buzz of activity around him intensified. Grace and Isabel, their faces lit by the glow of their monitors, shared a brief glance. They knew what was at stake. Jarek's resolve had always been their anchor, but now, even he couldn't ignore the cold, oppressive weight of the situation. "Captain," Isabel said, her voice steady but tinged with something else, something Jarek had never heard before, a tremor of fear. "If we can't hold them back this time, Earth will fall." "I know," Jarek replied, his voice gravelly, "but not today." The alien ships loomed larger on the tactical display, their weapons charging with an almost predatory gleam. The alien flagship, massive and imposing, seemed to grow more menacing with each passing second. They were preparing to annihilate Earth in one final, crushing blow. Yet, as Jarek watched their movements, something in him flickered. The arrogance, the confidence, the certainty they had shown at the beginning, it was gone. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had once seemed. "Hold your fire," Jarek commanded suddenly, his voice low. "Let them come." Grace looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Captain, we can't just wait for them to strike. We need to—" "We wait," Jarek interrupted. "The only way we win this is by making them underestimate us. Let them think they've already won." There was a heavy pause, the tension in the room almost unbearable. The bridge seemed to close in around Jarek as the crew, despite the fear, prepared to execute his plan. It was audacious, dangerous, but it was their only shot. Outside, the enemy fleet continued to advance. Jarek's mind was a whirlwind of calculations, of plans and counterplans. He had seen this before, though not like this. The aliens had underestimated humanity from the start. They had thought Earth was just another primitive world, easily subjugated, just one more in the endless line of conquered civilizations. But the humans had something that the aliens hadn't counted on, the ability to adapt, to evolve in ways that even their superior technology couldn't predict. "Brace for impact," Jarek said finally, his voice steady. "Now." The ship shook violently as the enemy fired, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space in a devastating storm of energy. The first blast hit Earth's shields, sending a shockwave through the hull, rattling every officer in their seats. The force was overwhelming, but Earth's defenses held, just barely. Jarek watched the readings on the tactical display, his mind already calculating their next move. He could feel the sweat on his forehead, his breath coming faster, but he couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. "Deploy the remaining drones," Jarek ordered. "All ships form up. We're going to hit them with everything we've got." With a rapid series of commands, Earth's last remaining drones surged into the fray, streaking toward the heart of the alien formation. They were small, nimble, but packed with the last of Earth's firepower. Jarek knew they wouldn't win the battle, but if they could just buy enough time. The alien fleet, now fully engaged, continued to advance, firing in every direction. Their weapons flared like beacons, each strike an unrelenting hammer against Earth's defenses. But then something shifted. The alien ships, so coordinated, so precise, began to slow. Their once fluid movements now appeared staggered, uncertain. Jarek didn't know what had caused it, but he didn't wait for an answer. "Now!" Jarek shouted, and the energy beam from Earth's flagship roared to life, slicing through the alien formation like a blade through cloth. The flagship was finally in position. The beam connected with the alien fleet, hitting its heart, its core, dead on. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The universe seemed to hold its breath. The flagship's shields flickered and then collapsed, the core of the alien vessel exposed. The alien fleet staggered, their movements now desperate, as if they realized that Earth wasn't the easy conquest they had believed it to be. It was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the soul of humanity. Jarek watched as the enemy flagship began to splinter, its massive frame groaning under the assault. And as the alien ships around it faltered one by one, Earth's final strike tore through their defenses, scattering the invaders like dust in the wind. The battlefield, once dominated by the alien force, now lay littered with the remains of their fleet. The silence that followed was deafening, the emptiness of space now a stark reminder of how far humanity had come. "Is it over?" Grace's voice broke through the stillness, her tone barely a whisper. Jarek's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, the last of the enemy fleet disappearing into the void. He knew it wasn't over, not truly, but this was a victory. Earth had survived, not by sheer force, but by outthinking their enemies, by standing tall in the face of insurmountable odds. And in that moment, Jarek realized something profound. Humanity's true strength wasn't in their technology or their firepower. It was in their spirit, their will to survive, and their unwavering defiance in the face of annihilation. "We won," Jarek said, his voice steady, the weight of the victory settling over him like a cloak. "We're not just survivors. We're the future." Outside the viewport, Earth was still, a small, fragile world in the vastness of the cosmos. But now, it wasn't just a target. It was a beacon, a symbol of defiance in the face of a galaxy that had underestimated humanity's strength. And as Jarek looked out into the vast expanse, he knew one thing for certain: Earth had proven its place in the stars, and the rest of the galaxy would never forget the price humanity had made them pay. "Let them remember this day," Jarek whispered almost to himself. "Let them remember Earth." And as the ship's systems came back online, the crew silently celebrated the victory, knowing that the battle had been won, but the war for Earth's place in the universe had only just begun. Part 4. A human captain in a futuristic warship, giving a fierce command as he stands at the center of the control room. The room is chaotic, with crew members moving quickly around him. The atmosphere is tense, illuminated by flashing red alerts and the glow from various holographic displays. The viewport reveals the vast, dark expanse of space, with the alien fleet looming closer. A large-scale space battle between humanity's fleet and an alien invasion force. Human fighters and drones soar through the void, engaging the enemy with blasts of energy. The alien ships retaliate with overwhelming firepower, their sleek, menacing forms dwarfing the smaller human vessels. The backdrop is a star-filled space, with Earth barely visible in the distance. Now create both images one by one in a 16:9 ratio, and these pictures are not for kids. Ratio and resolution must be good. Shift the focus, modify and adjust the prompt if the prompt doesn't align with your policy, but do give me images. Create mature version images, not some animation for kids.